Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 63 of the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. This week, we're talking about practical applications and installations. Ideally, we're going to talk about ways to upgrade the network while people are using the network without messing anybody's day up too badly. Going to recap a lot of the stuff we've covered in the past 4 sessions if you count the last week of January, because this has been an IT month and then some. Usual cast of characters with me again this week. We'd hope to have a special guest, but he got called away. So shout out to Stephen Poole, and hope everything works out. But we have got Mr. Kevin Trueblood, the Associate General Manager of WGCU Public Media, with us again today. Kevin, welcome back, and thanks for being here.
A nice consolation prize.
A consolation prize. You're much more than that. Now, and I'm going to quantify this. You did give us the caveat that you might have to scoot out early today. You got some contractors coming in.
Yeah, exactly. It's my turn to have the contractors coming over. Although this time it's not to actually do construction work. It's to go over a project we've got coming up. So yes, at some point I'll have to disappear, but I'll make my way back in if I get the chance.
There you go. So if Kevin just goes away from the AFK, if you will, I don't know if that's even a phrase anymore. I mean, my little guy doesn't use a keyboard for much of anything, but if you disappear, we'll know why. Also, we've got the IT and Engineering Director from Rhode Island Public Radio, Aaron Reed. Thanks for being with us again, Aaron.
I think it's more of a booby prize in my case, but hey, glad to be here.
So anybody who follows the Broadcast Engineers Facebook page know that Aaron and I engaged in a fairly spirited debate on Phillips versus hex head screws, and we may make some plugs and digs about that as we go through the day today.
We'll die on that hill, Jeff. I will die on it.
Last but absolutely not least, broadcast integration specialist for Wisconsin Public Radio, Mr. Alex Hartman. Alex, welcome back.
Thanks, Jeff. How you doing?
I'm having fun, probably more than I should, given what they pay me to do it. But hey, there you go. It's all good in the hood. So we're talking about applications and installations, and I know you've all done integrations and software and like network upgrades from fairly small to pretty darn big. So, we're going to try and, oh, look at there, first comment, Torx drive, the best. No argument from me on that, William. I am a big fan of the Torx. It's the only thing I've said. It's one of the only screwdrivers I got where I can put a wrench on the shaft and rank on it, and I know that it's something's going to move. But having said that, Robertson also has gotten mentioned, and I like those. Anyway, back to the mandatory housekeeping stuff. If you're new to one of our sessions, we try to make these as interactive as possible. As you can hear me reading the comments, you got the little question window in your control panel. Feel free to type in your question, comment, criticisms, concerns, sarcasm, snark, or sympathy, as that may be. And we'll type things up or bring them into the conversation as they fit. There's a comment about the native screwdriver of my people, which of course would be the Robertson square head screwdriver, the only screwdriver besides the Torx where you can hold your screwdriver with the blade pointing down and the screw stays on. So yeah, take that, you Phillips head lovers. All right.
The bane of my existence.
Also, on that note, if you're an SBE member and you've got certification, the completion of a Nautel webinar does qualify for half of a recertification credit under category I of the research schedule. Jot it down in your spreadsheet, notepad, whatever you use, stone tablet to keep track of that stuff. Hopefully after we get done today, the SBE won't reach out and revoke that permission. But I see Wayne Pacina's on. Wayne, I'll apologize in advance. Of course, Kevin, as we've mentioned before, you're also on the SBE board, so we'll try to be nice.
Well, yeah, or you could use a vinyl lathe if you wanted to keep track of it too, if you really wanted to go old school.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Now that'd be, well, and then I've got, I think still in the closet of despair and lost electronics over to my right, I believe I've still got a Panasonic quadraphonic stereo system in there. So fun times. All right, that's the mandatory. Oh, whoa, wait, one other thing. If you're not shy and you've got a microphone, you got the little hand raising icon there. If you click on that, Tim Barry, if you're on, don't click on that. Tim clicked it by mistake last week as I was discussing. But yeah, if you click on that, we can unmute you and make you part of the conversation. Always happy to do that. All right, so like I said, a little bit of recap from before. I want to talk a little more about the security aspect of bring your own device, or the lack of security aspect of bring your own device, and how it can sometimes, it can create some challenges. So we'll hit on that. Paul Meyer mentions tamper-proof Torx for security, and I'm here to tell you I've broken the blade off more greenies hammering the little center pin out of a security screw. Now, having said that, I've also got a whole bunch of selection of flat blade screws with a little notch filed out of the middle, so I can get the two-pronged approach for coffee makers. But anyway, that's a whole different discussion. So the big deal, and Alex had mentioned this before with, what was the name of that mapping program again, Alex?
Lucidchart.com.
I tested him on it in the preamble. I just wanted to see if his short-term memory is still working. So the big deal, and Aaron, I'm going to throw you under the bus on this one, not literally, but mapping and knowing what you've got. It's kind of, before you do an upgrade, it's kind of critical to know both where you want to go and where you are right now, right?
Oh yes, yes, very much so. I I often think of there was this great behind the scenes on Mythbusters a few years ago where Adam's talking about the differences between him and Jamie, and he talks about how Jamie is a very methodical planning sort who, you know, measures everything, comes up with a diagram, plans it out, and comes to a result. And Adam is just like, just try it, see if it works. And my nature is very, very much the latter. Like I'm just like, try it, see if it works. And yes, that's the further I've gotten in my career, the more that approach gets me into trouble. And yes, I've gotten much better, especially now that we are adding at my particular place at the camera's backwards from my perspective. At the Publix radio, we're adding a bunch of new signals coming up from the filing window last November. And yeah, you really got to plan in advance because things get very messy very quickly, and you will end up redoing it all from scratch anyways. So yes, and any, you know, I use Glyphy personally, but you know, anything really works. Alex's program is a great one as well. But I mean, also just using Google Sheets. I mean, Google Sheets are my best friend for all this stuff, not least of which because I can access it anywhere, including on my phone or at any computer I've got at a job site.
And I mean, you use Google Docs, and I'll go ahead to your network mapping spreadsheet, but you use Google Docs a lot just for the shareability aspect, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, we also are a Google Workspace institution. We made a conscious decision a couple years ago when we went to pretty much as we possibly could to the cloud. After going through a lot of different pluses and minuses between Google and Microsoft, like OneDrive or Office 365, we kind of basically I personally was relatively agnostic because I'm more cognizant of the flaws of each approach, but the staff was overwhelmingly in favor of the Google approach. They just liked it a lot better. And I thought, you know what, I need buy-in from these guys, and that was an easy way to get it. So we went down the Google Workspace route, and I've been happy since.
Cool. Now, Kevin, I mean, I know Alex brought up the Lucidcharts and Aaron's Google Docs, and I know you both in your day job and in your infinite spare time handle a couple of networks, small to large. How do you document?
I do the Lucidcharts thing. I do use Visio on occasion. That's at the full-time job. Visio is, you know, what we've got a license for, and that's what I use. But yeah, we do a lot of spreadsheets as well to keep track of anything that's got static IPs and just to kind of map out our different VLANs and our different networks. So that's the big thing. And then, yeah, like I said, Visio here's the air chain. At the very minimum, it's just here's the different pieces of the air chain. Just particularly at a contract station, they can walk in. I can walk through somebody and say, you see that chart? That's the different pieces in the chart.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it doesn't matter what you prefer. I mean, the young fellow was complaining about his laptop being too slow last week, so I blew the operating system out, reformatted the whole thing, and now it's running a Linux distro. And he uses Open Office for a lot of things. So, school related, and they're also a Google facility, but as Alex likes to remind me, Chrome is Linux based, so loading Chrome onto his laptop wasn't that big a challenge either. So,
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, that's one of the big things about using something like a Google Drive or something that is cloud-based. What's nice is then you're subject to the computing power of your browser. So your specs aren't going to be nearly as heavy to run something that's installed locally, because all you're doing is just running a browser. So if you can run the browser, you can do that. So you can use a lot more basic hardware.
right. Now, the usual caveats become, and we're an Office 365 facility here, so we do use the PowerPoint and the Excel and all that. The one thing to pay attention to is if you're storing something in a cloud situation, you do want to, if you can, have local access as well for the times you want it, and make sure they sync. So, the times you want to tweak on it when you don't have a network connection. These days, those times are fewer and further between, but they still do happen. Does anybody got a transmitter site where you don't have IT access yet? Aaron says no. Alex?
Well, but
Well,
I'm in Rhode
Alex has
Yeah,
got
Island.
IT access
actually, I
everywhere.
do have one. I do have one that does not have IT. It does not have any IP at it.
Yeah.
The best we can do is cell phones. Out in that middle of northern Iowa is a desolate wasteland for many reasons. But IT access is kind of new in that part of the world. So yes, the offline sync is a big deal for us. The ability of finding that in live updates, and syncing back into the cloud once you do make a change in those sites. Make sure it goes both
Yeah.
ways.
And you brought up a good thing, updates, and that's something, and we'll touch on it again a little later on, but how do you, and Kevin, I'll bring this back to you, because you say you sort of do a little bit on both sides of the fence, but how do you manage updates across the board?
Well, locally, it's our university IT has the Windows Update servers, and so a lot of that stuff is vetted and managed and then rolled out on a regular basis. For me, for what I do for a lot of the smaller installs, particularly if I'm doing like a Windows 10 thing, because obviously the biggest pain is Windows 10, is I just make it a point to actually set the update window so that because like what, if you can't disable it, which you typically can on enterprise versions of it, and then of course the complaint always is, well, then it re-enables itself and then it updates again. I actually set the active window to be off hours so that then it wants to update and install while I'm there. And then usually it's on a regular cycle. Like Monday mornings at our facility are our reboot days. And we go through and we reboot everything in our facility, video servers, automation, everything gets a reboot Monday mornings. And if there's updates to install at that time, that's when we do it. And that, I'll tell you, having a regular reboot cycle definitely keeps the problems at bay. The little things like, oh, we just need to reboot it. Like that doesn't happen because we just stay ahead of it.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I was handling a request earlier, actually last night, way last night, but somebody was talking about a processor card that was starting to, well, it wasn't necessarily that, but their audio was starting to get a little garbled, and 3 or 4 people said, oh, it's probably the internal processor. If you recycle or reboot the exciter, it should come right back. So yeah, it's one of those, if you're running your gear on a UPS and you're not subject to the normal power glitches that are, nature's power cycles, if you will, then having scheduled reboots is a good idea. That's something I wouldn't have considered. Thanks for that. That's useful right there.
Yeah.
Alex has got his, I want to say something, but it's going to be controversial and I'm trying not to stir stuff up face on. So I'm going to ask you for your input on this.
Know your environments. If you have Windows 10 Professional, not an Enterprise Edition like Kevin does, with where you can run WSUS against it, and block out certain updates, like the Windows 11 update. So those rolling reboot cycles are great until it wants to reinstall your operating system and nothing works after 20 minutes or 3 hours later. So know your environment prior to doing those, like right now, especially with Microsoft pushing out Windows 11 as hard as they can. So
And
beware of that.
That is huge. And again, like I said, younger fella, his computer, the Windows 10 updates broke several iterations ago. So it was struggling. And I mean, for it, we just we blew a Linux distro in and it's happier than anything. John Van Milligan makes a really good point, especially for you public radio fellas, which is everybody on this screen of cameras in front of me except myself. But they had a site with no internet at it and found a donor nearby where they could get internet at their house and put a data link from there to the site. So, something else, use your resources. If you've got a donor who doesn't mind having a little IP hotspot mounted in the corner of their house or whatever, you might be able to get IP.
I've actually done that. I've actually done that in the commercial world too, on certain sites, where I'll walk up to a house where I can, us engineers, we look at rooftops and towers, right? And we walk around and we look around and like, oh, look, that guy's got wireless internet. So you go knock on his door and say, hey, who's your wireless internet provider? But they just kind of don't reach your tower. So you kind of make this weird little deal with the wireless internet provider and the homeowner and be like, I'll pay your home internet. I'll pay your bill to use your house as my jump off point to my tower to get around a hill, for instance.
That's what we do. We do that for WNPN in Tiverton. The tower itself has no wired internet to it, and our local cable modem provider wanted, I think it was $13,000 plus a 3-year $400 a month commitment, just to run a cable modem, a freaking cable modem, which is not, cable modems are wonderful things, but they're not the most reliable of internet services. And so instead, I just kept going around looking for businesses nearby. I thought it'd be you can go to homes. I thought a business would be a little easier to deal with. And we eventually found a cafe about a mile north of the tower that had clear line of sight. And I talked to the owner, and it turns out he was a public radio fan. And I pay him $75 a month to let me put my cable modem next to his. And I've got a Ubiquity light beam aiming from the second floor of his cafe over to an access point 300 feet up on the tower, and it works great.
Yeah.
And in rural America, the co-op will be your best friend.
Yeah. And
they always have internet of some kind.
As you guys are talking about this, Kirk Harnack is saying the exact same thing in the comments that so there you go. I thought we were on to something new and innovative, and y'all have been using it forever. Trade
and also
is what radio does best.
Obligatory shout out to Josh Bone and his Max Connect service, which is also very handy. When you need cellular internet that is going to work, no matter how many other devices are nearby, I think he's the only one that offers a service that'll do it.
Yeah, and I've done a few sessions with Josh on this, and you can certainly go through our archives to find them. And Kirk just gave Max Connect a shout out as well. So the cool thing, well, not one thing, one of the cool things about Josh's service is that it's prioritized LTE. So in the cell company scheme of things, with respect to who gets priority, it's first responders and then Max Connect, and then everybody else trying to get their cell phone on at the football game and do their Snapchat and TikTok and you scramble and all that great stuff. Yes, I'm showing my age. I don't care. But hey, I've even got an Instagram account. I haven't opened it ever, but I do have one. Anyway, point being that it will give you a connection in a lot of places where there's a lot of congestion. Now, if there's no cell service, there's no cell service, and you can't do anything about that. And that's, at my particular site, that's a challenge.
I've got a war story that's kind of fun that everybody just kind of goes, oh, that's painful. I have a site that is co-located with Verizon Cellular. I can't get anything better than a wireline copper T1 to my room, but Verizon has like 3 terabits worth of bandwidth coming in on fiber to their room.
They won't share.
I can't touch it because it's wholesale fiber. to
Mhm.
Verizon. And
Right.
Verizon will not sublet services at the tower facilities because they're managed services for themselves. So they're not retail. So yeah, in these instances, what's worse, I can't use Max Connect at the site because the tower is in the cone of silence.
Right.
Oh
Now,
no.
here's a dumb question. What would it cost you to park an 8x8 Atco trailer at the corner of the site and have them run a drop to that and then beam it back? It's
We did
convoluted,
the
but
build out cost on that, and they said it was $1.3 million they'd amortize over the course of 10 years.
oh, that's a mere fraction. But
Right?
yeah, and William mentions the same thing, lease space to A&T who have fiber but can't get anything from them.
Yep.
So yeah, certainly, as Kevin said, and I see his contractors must have arrived, but
Yep.
certainly if you run into a situation, knowing what you've got available is almost as critical as knowing what you've got to accomplish.
I mean, this day and age,
So
everybody starts looking at, when you're looking to buy a house, it's not, you're not looking at square footage. The first question people are asking is, what kind of internet service and what company is supplying internet to this area?
yeah,
It's actually a
yeah,
prerequisite for buying houses now.
depending on who you're dealing with, sure it is. And I mean, with me, like I said, I complained to my ISP when my bill went up to, ouch, that really hurts a couple of months ago. And they said, oh, well, we can add your cable and we'll drop your rate. And it's like, well, wait, what? And they said, yeah, you were on a really old plan, so you were really overpaying. And it's like, well, thanks for letting me know that several years ago. But anyway, um, so they added the cable, they dropped the rate, and in the process of doing that, they upgraded the service from 100 meg service to 350 meg, which is, for our use, that's irrelevant, but it is an added bonus, and it's always nice to have a little extra.
But all these solutions that we're using as examples here, one thing I want to point out, like using the wireless internet one that I used, or Max Connect. Max Connect is kind of in a world of its own, but still has the ability, unlike regular cell services, of using VPNs for security.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you start looking at the neighbor's house saying you're a WISP and I need to get around this hill and the WISP is going to help me out here, make sure that they're VLANing you so that that house doesn't become a point of entry for your network.
Yeah. And Raymond makes a good note in the comments. He lives on a very rural ranch in Arizona and has to use wireless internet. And yeah, there are going to be situations where you don't have a choice.
Yeah,
And,
Mhm.
you do what you can with what you get to work with, I guess is the best
right.
way to. And
But
that
yeah,
comes back to
ubiquity
like,
can be your friend. I mean, these
yeah,
things these days, it's especially if the terrain's not bad, you can beam a good 20, 30 megabits per second bidirectional, easily 10, 15, even 20 miles now for like
right.
$150 of hardware.
Hmm.
Well, maybe a little bit more than that by the time it's all said and done, but still, we're talking less than $1,000.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Now, I got this slide up. What is the cloud? Well, we don't really care what the cloud is for the purposes of this conversation. But the one question I do have is I mean, these days, more and more stuff is cloud-based. Like I said, we're Office 365, so my email is hosted virtually. Um, I run Salesforce for customer management, and that's all hosted off-site. So that's all well and good. What levels of, number one, what levels of backup do you require? And number two, and sort of the corollary, when you're hosting stuff off-site, are there any additional steps with respect to security? And Aaron, I'll hit you with that first, and then I'm going to drop it over to Alex.
Sure. Actually, there's a bit of a funny story on that. When I first came here to what was then Rhode Island Public Radio, we had a main and a redundant STL to what the time was our main FM signal for Providence. And and both of them turned out to be hugely problematic. And then I realized why. What they were program audio service lines running down a very rural road to what was colloquially referred to as the Wheeler Farm, which is an athletics complex and educational compound out in the middle of the woods in Seekonk, which it might only be 5 miles away from Providence, but it might as well be on the dark side of the moon from a telco perspective. And these, there was no redundancy whatsoever. These lines were literally in the same cable bundle. They were going through the same wet spot every time it rained. It was like, no wonder they're always going down all the time. And that, as problematic as it was, it did serve a wonderful point in teaching me about how to look for real redundancy when you're trying to do data connections. It's not just about having a multiple connections. I mean, certainly it's better to have, if all you can do is 2 cable modems, that's better than 1 cable modem, because at least then if one croaks, you can reboot it while the other one is up. But you're not getting a whole lot of redundancy on that. Better to have like a cable modem and then FiOS, for example, or a DSL, something that relies on a different technology. Then at least now you've got redundancy in technology. But even then, you're looking at, well, wait a minute, where are those cables going that are coming out of your facility and heading towards the local central office? They might be going down the same exact pole, in which case, guess what? When the backhoe comes through, when the hurricane comes through, or the blizzard comes through and the tree crashes onto the telephone pole, guess what? You're toast. That's why I'm such a huge fan of the Ubiquiti gears, because it gives you physical redundancy in a lot of ways. It's not always perfect. I mean, it's very hard to really get on 2 completely separate central offices. But at least when you've got a wireless shot coming in, or if you're using a cell phone connection, you might be able to get away with the fact that, okay, maybe your nearest cell phone connection goes down the same time your cable modem does, but there's another cell tower close enough to provide data coverage that if the one nearest you goes down, at least the other one will kick in. It's I don't know of a good way of really like saying these are the rules you follow in order to achieve that level of redundancy. It's just one of those things that I've been able to pick up from years of doing it and knowing what to look for. So certainly if you or Alex have any tips about, for the uninitiated, for the people who haven't had the benefit of my hideous experience in this arena, to help them avoid the mistakes I've made, I would be all ears about that.
Well, I'll throw one other little, not so much piece of advice, but a caveat in there. And I'm glad you mentioned, FiOS versus Wi-Fi versus Ubiquiti, different platforms. It's one of the things I was looking at. Of course, I have not been in the office for just about exactly. Actually, yesterday was my 2-year anniversary of the last day I worked at my office, the Nautel offices. I've been here in the Dungeon of Dork and
Congrats.
Despair for 2 years. So that's been kind of cool. But one of the things I looked at doing was bringing in an alternate internet ISP, because our local ISP, like I said, they give us pretty good service and it's high speed. But we discovered during a lengthy outage that the batteries in their system will be gone in about 4 hours. And at that point, the internet's gone. And I'm here to tell you, Mama can live without power, but when the internet goes away, that's a problem. And well, we've got a generator for the power, so anyway, that's not an issue either. But so I looked at got one of these reduced rate ISPs in the area, and I called them up and I said, hey, what would you cost me? And they're like, it was, I don't know, $50, $60, $70 a month. It was not huge. And remember, Canadian dollars, so about a nickel 95 US. But I got asking a little more, and I said, well, I've never seen any of your trucks around. I said, who's, are you running on somebody else's network? Oh yeah, we run on so-and-so's network. Well, it turns out so-and-so happens to be the only other ISP in town, which is the one I'm trying to find redundancy for. So the solution ended up being dropping an extra $20 a month to FidoNet, and now my personal cell phone is a 25 gig Wi-Fi hotspot. And so that's what backs up, because they run on a completely different backbone than the internet provider. So that's one thing. Now, Alex, you I know have had some exact experience with Ubiquiti, going back to being one of the first guys to ever use one in a broadcast application.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve has asked the question in the questions about any problem with rain fade. So I'll let you address that, as well as just the applicability of a Wi-Fi bridge as a backup source or a
Sure.
primary source.
Sure. I mean, I was one of the first guys back in 2008 or something like that that went to the station manager and said, I want to mothball my Starlink system in favor of this $100 solution because I've built rural wireless internet providers using Linksys routers in Tupperware containers on top of grain elevators. Things you do because a guy wants internet, right? And, you know, those are eh, other ways of doing it, but the ubiquity stuff brought the price point to the layman. Prior to that, you know, Motorola Canopy was a big thing, but it was, I wouldn't say overpriced or expensive, but in the radio industry, it was unobtainium because no one wants to spend $3,000-4,000.
It was more money.
It was a lot more money
Yeah, and I
compared
mean
to a
back,
couple $100.
you know, back then you also had what, Transio, Dragon Wave, Trango. There
Yeah,
were a
it
couple,
was
but they
kind of a
were all on the.
fledgling technology in the outdoor side of things. Everybody had their indoor access points, but doing a point-to-point link across, you know, a city or further, or even multi-hop and meshing was very, very new in that world. And Ubiquity had brought to the table very affordable methods and means. So in the rain fade world, as to tell you an idea, Minnesota shut down today for a snowstorm. You know how bad that snowstorm has to be for Minnesota to shut down? Uh,
2 feet of
so,
snow just means you back it down to 65 when you're going up 35
right,
W.
right. So when we're looking around at this, and you ask about rain fade, it's no different than a 950 link when you try to do a link budget against it. You know your frequency, you know your spectrum, you know its downsides, and you plan accordingly.
Right.
So my 5 gig Ubiquity link going from the university to my tower, which is a 7 mile line of sight shot, is I link budgeted that on a normal good day that it has a neg 46 dBm signal. On a day like today, it will go down to neg 65, which Ubiquity thinks is full strength. So I have
Mhm.
20 dB of fade margin built in on a very snowy day.
Yeah. And the other thing to bring up with that too, and you mentioned link budget, and I'm glad you brought that up because the other thing, especially when you're dealing with wireless, is you need to figure out how much data you think you need and then throttle the system back to provide that plus a safety margin. Don't try to be pumping a full 100 meg down the pipe and expect
Right.
it to play nicely.
Not
Hmm.
only that, realize that airspeed is not wire speed. So when you're seeing a link that says 65 megabits, it's not 65 megabits like you would traditionally see on an Ethernet cable, for instance. That
32
is
and a half
really
that way,
32 and
32
a
and a
half
half
that
that way.
way, 32 and a half that way with overhead. So you're really getting about 28 each way.
Yeah.
So, you have to play that game and build in those margins when you're doing a link budget with IP.
Right. Now, the other thing, and this is we're kind of segueing off of the IP and the networking a little bit, so we'll have to get back on track. But the other thing to remember is if you're plotting a point-to-point shot like that, make sure you allow for little things like trees and buildings, because
Know your
and
surroundings.
right, and Ubiquity's mapper, as great as it is, and I haven't looked at it recently, maybe it's changed. Used to be it did not allow for terrain or foliage.
It
No,
allows
it
for
allowed for
terrain, but not
terrain, not
trees.
foliage.
Yep.
And like around here, when you got 60 feet of old growth forest between point A and point B, that can be the difference between making the shot and not making it.
Right. And when I'm doing a link, luckily a lot of the times I either have access to where it's going to be or relatively close to, like a rooftop, or I'll throw on a harness and climb a tower a couple 100 feet. Uh, you know, been known to do that sparingly, but have done it. And get up there and put eyes on it, or have your crew when they're there doing regular maintenance and you're thinking about one of these links. Make sure you just hand them take their phone up, take a picture, and text it to you. Look
Yeah.
through that shot and you know where your trees are, and then based on that you can go, this link's going to give me probably a solid 10 years before it starts giving me a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, tree growth. That's where I was waiting to say. Don't forget about tree growth
Yep.
over
Yeah.
time. And
And
actually,
always do it in the summer, not the winter time, because guess what,
yes,
attenuates really, really well.
leaves. Yes. Another thing
Yeah.
you can do too, and I've done this many times. I have a colleague that we it was a random chance meeting. She was doing some producing work for our newsroom, and I found out that she's actually a professional drone operator. And I don't mean like one of those, cheap little $100 or $500 drones. I mean, she invested $15,000 and got her pilot's license for this drone. And when you've got real drones like that, they have real cameras on them. So you can get good telephoto shots from pretty much any altitude you want. And often I found that hiring people like that costs me, a couple $100 for a few hours, less than 1,000
But it's a
usually.
wealth of knowledge.
And it's an enormous amount of knowledge, and it's so much easier than trying to drive around and find a high point that might give you the line of sight you're looking for, or trying to find time to climb a tower, especially if, like myself, I mean, I'm not like Alex, I don't climb towers. I'm neither licensed nor insured, and I also have a terrifying fear of heights, so I'm not a tower climber. So yes, drone operators can be your friend here.
Yep. And that's a new avenue. That's a new avenue too. That wasn't available 15 years ago.
Well, it wasn't even available 3 or 4 years ago, really.
Right,
I mean, it's very recent that they've become more
right.
common.
So
I mean, I've got no fear
that's
of
a new
heights.
thing that we get to play with.
That's it. My fear is not of heights. It's the whole falling thing that I'm a little cautious about.
Well, the trick to flying is that you fall and completely miss the ground.
There you go. Falling on purpose. Ira mentions, hey, copper pairs for transmitter feed that often got wet and noisy. Begged the telco consider running fiber. Never happened. Years later, returned to work for the same broadcaster. They had abandoned their phone company, put up 950 meg digital. On my transmitter inspection, I found 8 dark fibers terminated in the building. They ran the fiber too late for the need. And today I also have 6 gig IP-STL, cheaper than trying to rent even 1 dark fiber pair. And that is a very valid assertion. And fiber is wonderful as far as it goes, but fiber is subject to the same backhose that copper is.
And also just, I mean, not everyone's like this, but I am hyper skeptical of any third-party telco solution. I like controlling my STL. I like knowing that each step along the way is, the telco is my problem. I set it up to meet my needs. When there's a problem, it contacts me, because no one's ever going to care. No one at the telco company is ever going to care as much about your STL as you do.
And their maintenance schedule is not your maintenance schedule.
Oh yeah, and Lord knows most of them too. I mean, I've often heard, oh, just make sure you get a good SLA. For the last 10 years, I have not been able to get an SLA that does anything more than issue credits for future service. Well,
SLAs are pretty much a thing of the past, even in the enterprise world.
Yeah. I mean, who cares about credits? I need my fiber link to work. I can't have it down for 4 days.
The SLA nowadays is if you think you need 2, get 4.
Which is a good point about Ubiquity. It's cheap. Buy spares.
Yep, shelf spares.
They can and will die on you. If you have the opportunity to put 1 up, put 2 up, and run cables to both, because 1 can and will croak on you for no reason. But who cares?
It's not just Ubiquity. That's Dragon Wave, Lego Wave, Cadmium. You literally are putting these things on lightning rods.
Yeah.
And
they will be subject to Mother Nature.
Yep, exactly. Now, one question we talked about Max Connect, and Bud had asked about thoughts on, and plug your ears if you listen to the archive, Josh. I know you're not in the audience right now, but thoughts on Firstnet versus Max Connect. I've never heard of Firstnet, so I can't speak.
Firstnet is, well, as the name kind of implies, Firstnet. They were the smarter ones that figured out. They're the guys who provide the EMS and the fire and the police cellular stuff. And being broadcasters, a lot of times we don't get access to that, even though we're on that list, fourth in line. Nowadays it's more like 16th, but because Roblox seems to take priority some days. But they're good. They're a good competitor for Josh, I would say, but not available everywhere. Right. In the respect of they may not have their particular access level available in Kansas that they do in New York.
Right. So good to know. Now, one comment, and William makes a really good point here on the questions. we were talking earlier about making sure your path plot or whatever you use on if you're looking shooting a Wi-Fi link or whatever that allows for foliage. And this is where I put the plug in. If you go to nautel.com, click on support tab over to the right, and then look for RF Toolkit. You'll have to log into the Nautel users group to get to it, but that's free. And although I think they send me a little note around every year or so, I can promise you I ignore it. But plug your ears, boss, in case you're listening. Anyway, having said that, the RF coverage tool in there does give you the ability to plot a point-to-point link. It's using Longley Rice. It's pretty darned accurate. It uses the USGS topo maps for North America, and it will give you a good, and it will include the foliage, or you can turn the foliage off if you're really feeling brave. So yeah, Curtis mentions it's not the heights or the following, it's the sudden stop at the end that's the, so that's it. We're not afraid of heights, Aaron, we're afraid of sudden stops. So it's just
Speak for
abrupt
yourself.
change.
That's
Yeah,
valid.
it's just abrupt change I have an issue with.
Well,
Right.
I'm an engineer. I hate change.
So
So
let's talk a little bit about on this slide real quick about, cloud versus virtualization versus on-prem versus, like you said, the Office 365 or the Google Suite. Wisconsin Public Radio, we use Slack, Google, Teams. It's a university setting, so we have all of them, all of the above. This morning was a perfect example. Slack was having problems. That's our internal system for if you're having a problem on your show, ping us here.
yeah,
We didn't know about a problem this morning because Slack went down. What do you do? We actually internally talked about it. We're like, we really don't have any kind of redundancy for this because the cloud broke.
yeah.
Oops.
And Greg, our IT director, is he's listening in the audience, so I hope his ears just started burning. But and he'll get brought up in person in a couple of minutes because he's done some awesome things with regards. As I said, you remember when I started at Nautel, our network was 2 computers connected with a piece of coax running Lantastic. And so, it's grown by leaps and bounds, but sometimes we've grown it faster than we've really. There was a little less planning and a lot more growing at various stages over our history. And Greg's been the guy kind of tasked with taking all of that and turning it into a secure and functional network. And I like to tease him because one of the things, our trouble ticket, we log into JIRA, our engineering database, to open an IT trouble ticket, which is great unless I need to open the trouble ticket because I can't get into the VPN, which is what's required to get to JIRA.
Yeah.
So, in that case, we just send an email and that works fine too. But
and on the other side of that, we use Jira as well and Confluence for data dissemination and ticketing and Opsgenie for the on-call rotation. But we use the cloud service version of it instead of the on-prem version.
Yeah.
Guess what has the same problem? It's a different problem, but it ends up in the same result. It's only from trusted IP space, the universities. So
I guess that's kind of where I was getting back to originally was the need for redundancy. And like I say, I mean, Greg has no control over the internet in my house, and I wouldn't expect him to. So
right,
that's
and
up
that's
to me.
our jobs here too, and Greg as well, to look at and analyze. He may not know what the business unit needs as mission critical. What does the sales team of Nautel require as mission critical? It's going to be on a different priority list than what his list is.
Yeah.
Access to Salesforce or whatever. Or in our neck of the woods, for Aaron, just the same. Aaron, what's your communication between your on-air staff and IT and engineering? How are they communicating their problems? What kind of ticketing system do you guys have other than Post-it notes on your door that you haven't seen in a year?
I was going to say communication. Surely you jest.
No, I know it's radio, but still.
Kevin picked a great time to come back.
In a way, everything. In a way, Alex, you're kind of bringing the point home. We don't have a formal communication system here because it's just me. And in fact, in a way, it drives me crazy because I keep getting emails and calls and texts and Slacks and Google Chat and God only knows what other ways they find to communicate with me. Passenger pigeons probably. With that are asking me questions that I'm like, dude, this is what I've said 16,000 times before. This is a question for our managed service provider. Go bother them. And yeah, but in a way, we've traded efficiency for redundancy in that everyone has, they have my cell phone. They also generally have my home phone, but no one ever bothers calling me on that, thank God. So they text me, they call me on my cell phone, they email me, they Google chat me, Slack occasionally. I'm not a huge Slack user, and not everyone on staff is, but some people are. But that's how we get the redundancy is that, we kind of have to all be responsive within a certain amount of reason to all of these communication channels. It's all just kind of flowing all over the place. Yes, and we're sacrificing an enormous amount of efficiency to get that level of redundancy, but also to a certain extent, it's really more just to get that level of comfort, I guess you'd say, with the users, what they're comfortable with. It drives me a little crazy, but only a little bit, so I don't really mind.
And especially right now with a lot of this work from home stuff where your hosts could be on their kitchen table. And they don't know that, oh, why is it everything quiet? Well, someone forgot to log in and press on that channel for your Comrex, or some queue didn't trigger right. But what is that at the host level or DJ level to escalate into, hey, I've got an on-air problem because we're running around with our heads cut off, running cable, dealing with fiber splices, backhoes, whatever. Wet dry line, wet copper in the ground, but we don't know any of that because we're only human, right? We don't sit here and listen to the radio station 24/7 to listen for dead air. We have machines that do that for us, or the people in the chair telling us there's a problem. So, at that point, when you have, like you said, that efficiency issue, where it's like any port in a storm, whatever you have, whatever makes you comfortable, there's no official line to get to me.
And that kind of brings it back to the entire upgrading the network philosophy, because whatever upgrades you make have to allow for the fact that people are going to tend to get to you whatever way they find convenient. I mean, I would guess these days that almost a quarter of my business communication with outside customers comes in via Facebook Messenger.
Hey, I'm guilty of that.
Yeah,
Kevin, I mean, I see three faces on this screen that I've had Messenger chat with in the past month. Sometimes it's just convenient because you can find somebody on Facebook.
Right.
But that's a really good point, though, as you're developing your infrastructure. And like I said, we're slowly, and to Greg's benefit, he's been infinitely patient with my growling and griping and whining and crying. But as we go to zero trust more and more, this laptop that I'm talking on and this cell phone in my hand are the two officially Nautel approved ways for me to reach VPN. Well, email, I can't get VPN on the phone, I don't think. I don't know. I haven't looked. Doesn't matter. I've got a laptop right now. But yeah, one of the things, and we'll see it later on, we're starting to get away from the bring your own device because you lose control. And from an IT management perspective, how do you do that balance of convenience versus security?
Right.
So, Kevin, you just got back. You're making the face. What's your answer?
Put me on the spot. Yeah, well, I mean, as far as a mobile device is concerned, there's pretty much like two options these days. You're on iPhone, which is the great, good chunk of your staff, and you've got a handful of Android devices, so it's easy to standardize on that. In terms of bring your own device, our university IT is basically allowed still the VPN client to run on anything, but you're still pretty restricted what rights you have and what access you have. So you can install it on your personal machines if you want to, or you can log in through their web domain, which does the same thing as well. So that's how we manage it here.
Alex, we actually buy iPhones for everybody. We went back and forth for years about offering it as a benefit, and some people wanted it and some people didn't. And then finally, we just kind of said, that's it. It's a blanket policy. Everyone gets a company iPhone, and that is your official company communications tool. If you want to have your own cell phone and do whatever you want with it, fine, but it's not getting on company resources. Only the company
And
phone is.
that's the policy we have been working more and more toward here. And it's funny, like I said, at first I struggled, and then I actually start to, think a little bit. And that happens sometimes. It takes a little while. But when I start to look at it, and it's like I said, I've had well, not this exact cell phone, but the phone number tied to it pretty much since cell phones were invented. It's the first cell number that Nautel had. Second, sorry, the first one went to one of our sales guys. The sales guys gives all the shiny new stuff first, except now. But anyway, um, and so over the years, it was the only cell phone I had, and so yeah, there was some personal stuff mixed in there. And as Greg's been pushing the separation of church and state, if you will, in the work environment, I said, that makes sense. And I picked up my own cell phone and started migrating my personal stuff over onto my own device. So, it's one of those, he taught me a lesson, even if he didn't mean to. So, Greg, pat yourself on the back for that one if you're listening.
By the way, one other thing I was going to say too about the
Yeah.
bring your own device is, like, for what we do too, you can bring your phones, you can bring like a laptop into our building, and you can attach to a guest Wi-Fi. So you have access to basically the internet, and that's about it. But your device does not get on our local network. We do have a private wireless network and obviously the LAN that the approved devices are allowed on too. So like if you have a laptop, you can walk around and be on the private Wi-Fi and access everything as though you're on the LAN. But that's only for devices that are on the campus domain, that have been vetted, that have all the proper security protocols, not your own Wi-Fi. Like you can get, decent Wi-Fi, but on your personal device, but you're not getting to the network on that.
Right.
By the way, I should point out, this is not necessarily a terribly expensive proposition for a company to do anymore. Used to be, I mean, you think about getting, this is the heck is this? I think it's an iPhone 11. I think this costs the company $100, and the monthly fee is $35, as I recall. All of our phones, I think, are $35 a month, and we get iPhone SE 2020s for free, or like a penny or something like that when someone needs a phone. So, and we're on Verizon. So, and we are on we're on the technically the government plan, which is where they put nonprofits. So that's a good point, actually. Yeah, we're a nonprofit, so we do qualify for certain things. But I do think in general, even for-profit companies, as long as you've got like 10 or 12 phones that are all coming in on one account or greater than that, you can start getting access to some really substantial discounts.
So I want to bring up a couple of things as you guys have kind of just done your thing here. And Shane points out a lot of good points. When you have 500 employees, that penny adds up. When you're that kind of an institution. Now let's take that down into let's get out of the public radio world for a second, where, yes, I have an iPhone 13 Pro Max. This is a $1,500 phone that the university paid for, but they get a discount rate because they buy 10,000 of them. Big difference. Now let's use the smaller guys. Let's use the mom and pops, or maybe a small cluster where you need a dozen of these. And yes, I am just as guilty. I double fist. Here's why. This is my personal device. This is my work device. If you use your personal device for work, they allow it. It's fine. You can bring your own device. However, you sign a contract. As soon as this touches their network, they have the right to destroy it.
Yeah.
So if there's something wrong and it comes from your phone, they can remote destroy it. And that's your personal property. So is that worth the risk to you? Not to me. That's why I say give me a work provided phone. Right. And it's also a personal demarcation of work versus personal life. Things like that come into play. But in the smaller radio stations where you need like half a dozen phones for your air staff, or salespeople or marketing, whatever. In this day and age, it is more beneficial for you as a business to provide that phone than to have your people provide their own device
Right. And the risks that come with that.
and the risks that come with it.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to throw the note in. We're 4 minutes from the top of the hour. We have not finished one of these sessions at the top of the hour. I don't expect that to be any different today, given that I'm on slide 6 at 12. So we will be running late, folks. As always, this will be archived. If you have to drop out, we do understand, but we hope you can hang along. Ira mentions that, and they do a similar thing to what we do, that only company devices are on the internal network, but they have a guest network. So if you have your own device and you need to get in and access the internet, or like I said, me and my Facebook Messenger to talk to you guys, whatever, then they provide a restricted guest network that doesn't give them access to the internal business network. So
And a lot of
they're
university settings, like here, St. Cloud State, for instance, the guest network literally is the only thing you're doing is transiting internally at the layer 2 to a separate cable modem. You don't even get to touch the fiber the university gets. You have a separate entire portal system that you can't even access campus resources from.
Yep. Let's see. Keith's got a big long. I got to stretch this out so I can read this one. This is lengthy, and there we go. Just a comment. Currently using old-fashioned analog copper lines as an STL to our transmitter located 2.4 up the hill. By the way, I haven't read this in advance, and I'm reading fast. So if there's anything unacceptable, blame Keith, not me.
Did you just lose Jeff's audio?
Did I lose my audio again?
No, he's
no
good.
Audio? Oh. Okay, we're sure?
Yeah, it's just Aaron this time.
Okay, it's just Aaron. Yay. So let's see. Decided to go with Ubiquiti system, Ubiquiti terrain study versus the Cambian argument with the contractor regarding that. Oh, there. Given the terrain study, Ubiquiti shows a clear path where Cambian shows it will be blocked by trees. And this comes back to the same thing we were talking about before. You need to be sure, because I know Ubiquiti didn't used to allow for foliage.
Yep.
So absolutely, that's if you're doing an STL plot, pay attention to that, because
and yes, that is a big thing now, is that the telcos are getting out of the telephone business. They're asking PUCs to retire the wireline plants and being allowed to do so. So now they have no recourse for, if you have a T1 going to your tower site, they have no obligation to fix it. And then their only option is that, you can install fiber at your cost.
Now here's a question, and I don't know the answer to this one. Curtis is asking, how secure is a cell phone with dual SIM options for keeping work stuff separate from personal stuff? I think to me, that's kind of a dangerous, a slippery slope, if you will.
It is. It's very much a slippery slope.
From a legal perspective, there's no difference because it's by the device.
Yep.
Okay, so it's still the same box. Recommended, don't do it. What it all comes down to, and so as I mentioned earlier, Stephen Poole was going to be with us today, so I reached out and just made sure we could use the few comments that I'd swiped from their engineering newsletter. If you don't read the Crawford Broadcasting or Crawford Media Group's engineering newsletter, it's a great resource on what they're doing, and there's a lot of good advice. But they had a physical intrusion attempt, and this is some reprobate with a Stanley Fubar sledgehammer or whatever. He brought his own device, obviously. But the comment was made talking about security, and I just used the picture as a highlight of it. But the comment was made in the newsletter that when you're talking about security, it doesn't matter how much security you've got. If you let the users, and this would be the discussion that Greg and I have, to the point where he's probably really tired of seeing me pop up in his teams, but where the users start trying to poke holes in the network or in the security. And this was what we talked about before, like blocking ports that you don't need and zero trust. So Shane wants to know if that's an unmasked IP. you know, that's the kind of thing that you really need to pay attention to. And
Yep,
let's see.
it is.
Yeah.
I mean, the physical aspect of it is just as important as the IT aspect of it, right? Because if you have no physical control over your stuff, you don't have any control over your stuff. Um, so even at tower sites, knowing the cameras are there, and Shane, yeah, that's a CGNet IP. Good luck. Um, the the size of sizing up your physical security using IT devices like a camera that's internet accessible. Now, as we were talking during the pre-game warm up here, you know, there was a site, I can't remember which one he is, Kevin, you had someone who knew the camera was there, so they took that out first.
Yeah, that's what ends up happening is it's the same thing with cybersecurity. You just end up with smarter criminals who
Right.
learn ways to circumvent the system. Like our physical transmitter site, we had redone all the fences, all new barbed wire, all new lighting, cleared all the brush. So, and it's along a major highway, so you can be at the building and you will be seen. What was their solution to it? And we put cameras all around the building. Their solution to that was, well, now they just come up from the side of the property. There's a vacant property adjacent to us. They come up the side of it on an ATV, and then they knock the camera out before, and then come over and take our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that comes back to, again, the whole zero trust principle, bringing it from the physical back into the IT domain. And this is one of the things, this is an email I got very recently, yesterday or the day before, where we're about to remove all the web access to Outlook. And so if you have a NOTL device, you'll have a temporary interruption until they physically go in and grant access again, which is a lot of after hours work. I mean, these folks work longer hours than I do, and that's saying something. But yeah, I mean, how do you, convenience versus access? What do they say?
Mm-hmm.
The most secure network is the one nobody can get into.
It's also the one no one can use.
Right. Well, same process, same thought
The best
process.
network ever
Exactly.
designed was the one that was never plugged in. So there has to be a trade-off of you know that there are known risks of certain things. Let's use that physical security thing with IP cameras, for instance. Things like this don't actually just happen in movies. This is real life nowadays, where they will go bash the camera off the wall that has an Ethernet jack on it.
Hmm.
Guess what you just gave them access to? Your
Yep.
entire security network, which could be door locks, passwords, AD, everything.
Yeah.
Or DVR recordings even.
Hmm.
You know, people have actually gotten this smart. Like you said, they're just making smarter criminals nowadays to erase the tracks of not getting caught.
Hmm.
Wi-Fi cameras, you think you're safe there? We've already covered in previous instances. Wi-Fi is insecure by nature.
Yeah.
And these cameras use standard off-the-shelf residential Wi-Fi. Sniff it
Right.
in
And
10
I mean,
minutes.
whether it's WPA, WPA2, or whatever security you've got enabled, Wi-Fi by definition is easy to intercept.
Mm-hmm.
So easier to intercept. I'll quantify that a little.
So
Oh,
with that, yeah.
just
So
throw in for Jerry. He was asking about the acronym. BYOD is Bring Your Own Device, where I can use my personal cell phone to access my company network. Actually, I cannot because they've restricted that, rightfully so. But that's what BYOD is, where you use your
right.
own device to do work stuff.
So there's a certain level of accepted risk, like bashing the camera off the wall to, you know, oh look, there's an Ethernet jack. That's a relatively new thought process, but it is a thought process, right?
Right.
And as Ira points out, you need cameras looking at the cameras. Well, ever worked at a convenience store? That is exactly what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that do exist, but those are known risks, right? So what's going to stop your people from doing their thing, right? How do we, as broadcasters, allow our program directors to get into Music Master remotely, which is on a sensitive server in the back room?
Yeah.
Hopefully, you're not just saying here's the VNC login,
Yep.
but you know, those kinds of things where you don't want to make it so painful that they can't do their job.
Right. And I think one of the big things, and this is critical anytime you're doing an update to a network, and really you should have, and this is something that I guess it's not really recent. Well, it's in my terms of my tenure at Nautel, everything is recent, but having an actual written policy on what you can and cannot do is huge. If for no other reason, it's something you can point to and say it's in the policy. You know, and it comes back to the whole documentation thing that we've talked about so much, not just mapping the network, but telling people, setting the expectations. That's what we call it in sales, you know, managing expectations. Let people know, hey, you're not putting stuff on your company issued computer unless we say it's okay. I'll hit back. Aaron, you nodded at the wrong time. So you're the guy I'm going to, do you guys have a written policy for that?
No, we probably should.
There,
I mean,
teaching the teacher.
yeah, I mean, we're nowhere near zero trust yet. That's one of those things that is probably going to come up as this calendar year progresses, because we're looking at renegotiating exactly what we have an MSP for, and we're looking very hard at bringing in an IT expert to be full-time on staff, and that is probably a direction we will start moving more down, is having someone on staff to manage this stuff. Actually, I'm going to start circling back to something that Alex was talking about balancing risk versus expectations. This is one of the things that historically radio has, if you'll pardon my French, really sucked at, is that it's, oh yeah, well, you need to do this. Well, if you're going to do this, you have to do A, B, and C. And if you do A, B, and C, now you got to do 1, 2, and 3 as well. Well, who's going to do all that? You know, there's only so many hours in the day. And if this IT stuff is actually important, you know, you have to start deciding that you're going to allocate more man hours of skilled humans to manage it all and to deal with it all. Now, whether that means you're paying for an MSP, whether that means you're engaging more of a university's resources that they will, you know, either gladly or grudgingly give to you, or whether that just means you got to hire more staff. You know, it's not realistic, nor is it fair to just dump all this on the engineer, you know, every time something new comes up. And that's, like I said, that's where we're probably moving towards, is having someone in-house who is full-time to deal with IT. But we're also going to have a more limited scope MSP that IT person will then manage that relationship, and they will be available to handle such things as, hey, I need to do an update on Windows. How do I do that? It's not letting me. Or, hey, I need to update Creative Cloud because we're a Creative Cloud shop. It's not letting me, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And there's demarcations of that world too. Like, let's use, you know, Wisconsin Public Radio, which Kevin's very familiar with. This part never existed when he worked here. Is that you have the high level engineer guys, right? The guys running the show, you know, maintaining the servers, the virtual environment, security audits, learning new firewall techniques, training, stuff like that. Very, very, very detailed, you know, skilled level stuff. But we also have another team of people who are, hey, I can't get my email. There's a different team that we're not wasting these resources for. So you have to have that front line. So maybe, you know, Aaron, in your approach, a combined approach is you need an IT guy to handle your on-site stuff, but the MSP is going to handle the day-to-day.
Yeah.
You know, there's a hybrid that needs to happen in that respect. I know Nautel had the same thing when I worked there. There was a guy who helped with the local desktop side of things, but then if there was something system-wide or a port access or something like that, that went to Greg.
Or
I
actually,
mean, help desk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it still kind of sort of does. And again, I mean, this comes back to what we were talking about in the first session, where Aaron had mentioned that when we were talking about KQED, about how the standard is that ideally 5% of your staff should be the IT department.
6.5 in
you
media
looked it up.
intensive environments. It's
Yeah.
5% for most regular companies, but when you're talking about something that's more of a technology-based entity, like a broadcaster, hey, guess what, folks? We're a technology firm. It's supposed to be 6.5%.
Greg, take notes. Aaron said it right here. We got the archive for you.
yeah, you're a manufacturer though. That's a big difference.
Yeah, we need even more again, because
1% tops.
what's one of the things we create? Software. Anyway, back to the point-to-point links. Keith makes another good thing. If you're planning a wireless network, pay attention to what operating frequency you choose. In his case, their contractor was planning to put a 5 or 5.8 gig Wi-Fi bridge with one link sitting on top of a university dorm.
Yeah, and knowing your frequency
Hey.
coordination, especially with the ISM bands, doesn't matter if it's 60 gig, 18 gig, 5 gig, 2.4 gig, 900 meg. You know your neighbors. You guys know this by now. Ubiquiti has spectrum analyzers built into the radio. Pop one up on a tower somewhere, or just wave it around in the air and see what's around. Know your neighbors. It's no different than, you can't exactly call ComSearch. So you turn into ComSearch.
Frequency coordination. Yep.
You coordinate, and if you plan on using the ISM bands for any of this, contact them, reach out. They don't want to interfere with you any more than you want to interfere with them. So they will work with you.
Yeah. And of course, now in the process of trying to steer the conversation, I throw the slide up and then we talk about the previous topic for another 5-10 minutes. What we're looking at here, education is huge. So at the top 2 on the right-hand side are 3 emails. This is my February emails and note. And the reason they're all noteworthy is because, except for the top left one, which Greg pointed out, uses some British spelling as opposed to North American type. But the grammar's getting better, the spelling's getting better, and every single one of those is non-legitimate email. And how do you educate the users that you don't just willy-nilly click on all the links and everything?
You don't.
So Kevin,
you block them. The whole point is that these spammers have 1,000 times the resources, time, and incentive to create psychological profiles that defeat human natural responses to not fall for the trick. So yes, you can say just don't click on that stuff, and you can say it 1,000 times. It doesn't hurt, but inevitably it only takes one. I won't use the word I want to use. One person on your staff who clicks the damn link.
Distracted person.
Yeah, well, that's not the word I would use, but that's a good substitute. And they click on the link. No, it's if you want to have security against this, you've got to block it at the server level. You've got to do something that doesn't let human nature let you down.
Right.
I highly recommend, by the way, if you want to understand more about where this stuff comes from, read the Freakonomics guys, especially I think it's their 3rd book, Think Like a Freak. There's a whole section on there called Teaching Your Garden to Weed Itself. That is phishing explained perfectly.
Yeah. And Shane mentions that Freakonomics, that's a great training resource. Chris indicates, he tells his people, even if it appears to be from someone pick up the phone and verify first.
Yep.
And that's not a bad one. Now, in the case of the lower right-hand one, that sign in to view your fax came from a university purchasing department. And I do, on the rare occasion, still get faxes from university purchasing departments. Y'all take a little while to leap into the 90s sometimes. But now, having said that, almost always I will get an email first or a phone call first saying you're going to get an email with a fax in it. And if I get to this one first and don't get that, then I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, and that's, again, it comes back, yeah, you're not going to block them all. And, short of intercepting every email and making Greg, who already has a full-time job, read every one of the several tens of thousands of emails we get every day to verify that it's legit or not, then you need to rely on a certain level of education among your staff. You're not going to block it all, no. But I think it's still a requirement to tell people, hey, don't click on the obvious ones at least.
Yeah, what we've taken to do is our university IT will send out basically training emails that say, look, you're going to get these because, yeah, there's a lot of things we can do to block it at the server level to, remove things that are suspicious, but they're smart and they've just gotten really good at social engineering and making things look more and more legit. And so it's come to training people what to look like and when to ask questions, like you were saying, Jeff, when to pick up the phone, when to ask, like, wait a minute, why is my boss asking me to go buy $500 in gift cards? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like, and don't tell anybody. Well, that's not something that they normally do. So yeah, that's kind of what it's come down to, is a lot of social engineering and just training people. Hey, this is what it's going to look like if it comes through.
Yeah. Now, Shane has thrown, sorry, he mentioned training resource. He threw a link up in the questions. So, Ed, I'm going to get you to throw that. It's knowbefore.com with 4 as the digit, not the word. But Ed, I'll get you to throw that up in the chat so everybody can see it. And again, just some good education. One of the other things, no matter how you upgrade your network, is keeping up with updates. And you hear a lot of people, and I was mentioning earlier that the young fella now has a shiny new, well, new to him, Linux computer, and he's very happy because he can do whatever it is that he does online that I probably should know about and don't. Actually, we do a little bit. But anyway, even if you're running Linux, there are updates, and there are updates on a fairly regular basis. So, what do you do for a system to keep up with updates? And Aaron's looking like don't ask me, we don't have a system. So yeah, Aaron, what do you guys do to keep track of updates? And you got contracted MSP for a lot of this, so that falls outside of your bailiwick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real easy one for me to answer, and that is I don't. That's what I have my MSP for. They handle such things.
Right. Kevin's got his perturbed face on. Oh, he's reading his other emails now. He's not even paying attention. So this is the time to put him on this. So how do you
What's that?
How do you control updates on your end?
Well,
we were talking earlier about the Windows, so that was a good example.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the big one. If we can, it's trying to sandbox things, put it into, a virtual environment if we can, and try and run them. And then again, like, that's why we do a lot of the updates on Monday morning, so that if something breaks, we have a lot of time to fix it. Because the last thing you want to do is hey, let's run this seemingly harmless update at 2 p.m. on a Friday. What could possibly go wrong?
Well, that's like I mean, it's the age-old. You don't do the field modification on the transmitter an hour before evening drive on a long weekend.
Exactly.
Ideally,
so, yeah, that's what we've taken to do is, if we can sandbox it, we'll sandbox it. If not, we just try and do it with as much lead time as possible and verify everything's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the big one. So, one thing, let's see, we're 20 after the top of the hour. So we'll give you each a couple of minutes. Let's start with Alex, because we know Alex can't say anything in a couple of minutes. But you're planning a network upgrade. What are the things that are probably most critical to remember?
What you're actually
I know
doing.
network upgrade is very generic, so it could be anything.
Could be anything. So, I mean, if you're doing like a server upgrade, make sure you have backups, things of that nature before you touch anything. So if you have to backpedal, you can. Otherwise, it's try and keep up, and hopefully 8 a.m. is really far away. The physical wire plant, I hope that you're just not grabbing a box off the shelf and saying, we're going to do this today. You should be planning for months on these kinds of infrastructure upgrades and run it past other people in your field, or call me even, or Kevin, sometimes Aaron's MSP, not Aaron, but his MSP.
Yeah, don't call me. Good Lord, no.
Right.
He's too busy telling people why
if you are in an area of if you're outside your wheelhouse, make sure we're all friends in this very, very small shrinking industry. We all have each other's phone numbers. If not, get it from Jeff. We're more than happy to help for those knowledgeable people who are just coming in or don't know what they're doing with it or have questions. I will be happy to take a 5-minute phone call, which will turn into an hour, which we all know it does.
Consultation rates may apply.
Right. Make sure I have your billing address. But to do it wrong, I don't want to use the word wrong in the negative context. If you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it. So that's really the takeaway from putting this all together. If you're outside of your wheelhouse and your manager tells you you have to do what Alex and Aaron and Kevin and Jeff said to do on this webinar series, tell them no. Don't be afraid. You can be assured that you will make a mistake. We are human.
Yeah.
And you need to bring in those experts.
That's the big thing. I mean, it's, even if it's something as simple as setting up, unless you've got a step by step set of detailed directions, it's real easy to miss one setting that just brings the whole shooting match to its knees.
I mean, I had to write instructions on installing Windows for Looking Glass for Nautel when I licensed it to them. It was 361 steps.
Yeah.
To install Windows.
And that was Alex being concise.
Yeah.
So that's a really good thing to know. Let's see, going clockwise on my screen. Aaron, you're next up. You're planning to do an upgrade. What are the most critical things? I mean, knowing what you don't know is Alex's hot point, and that's a really good one. What would you say your big deal is?
Well, I mean, the obvious is documentation. Know what you have, know where you're trying to go, and know how to get between those 2 points. And not just because it's for your own sanity, but also because then you can take your plan to someone who knows more than you, because Lord knows there's always somebody, no matter how smart we are, there's always somebody who knows more than you, and say, hey, did I screw something up? What would you suggest I do differently? And if you've got a plan there, they can actually go over it with you. Beyond that, the two biggest things and these are really broad oversights, but one is I always try and go for I guess you'd say a parallel deployment, whereas I'm not replacing anything per se, I'm building a new system that runs alongside it. And then at a certain point, we will cut over, or there'll be a transition period, and then we retire the old system. That frequently means buying more hardwire, pulling more cable, paying for more software, but you save an awful lot in headaches. And actually, I mentioned timeline. It's important to have one of those more than anything else because of, well, first of all, it gives you the kick in the ass you need to actually do the work, but also for your users. Because there's always that one or two holdouts that want to keep using their old machines because that's what they're comfortable with, and they don't want to learn, and you got to have a timeline that kicks them in the ass and says, no, I guarantee you will be happier a month from now once you've gone over to this new system. And sometimes they'll do it kicking and screaming, but at least having a timeline gives you that justification with their supervisor to drag them kicking and screaming.
Yeah. And that you mentioned a really good point, and it's something I wanted to bring up. We call it a sandbox, but you develop your new system or your upgraded system totally independently. The advantage to that is multiple. Number one, as you said, full redundancy, so that if you do screw it up, you're not interfering with the day-to-day process of the business. Number two, you can bring the users in a little at a time and let them get used to it and learn it before you actually turn them loose on it. And it does require a little bit of a time contribution from everybody involved. But as you said, it's the most seamless way, because then at the point you get everything done and smoothed out, you can spend the time, you can blow out anything you may have created in the sandbox process, mirror over your old system onto the new system, and pull the switch, and away you go. I make it sound easy. That's not quite as simple as it goes. So did I miss anything, or does that sum it up, Aaron?
No, sounds pretty good to me.
All right, Kevin, upgrading a system, what's your key takeaway?
Key takeaway is, obviously a lot of us, the luxury is having time to plan and prepare for these things. And that's sometimes a luxury we don't have. It's, hey, this needs to happen next month to make it work, and here's no money for it. But obviously you want to go into every project, particularly when it comes to this, with as much time and detail worked out ahead of time before going into it, because what that's going to let you do is it's going to minimize your downtime. It's going to minimize the amount of headaches, you're still going to have problems. You're still going to have headaches day of when you actually go to install this gear, but actually making your plan, organizing your networks, making sure you have accounted for everybody who needs access, what they need access to. And like what Aaron was talking about, that's what I did at Wisconsin Public Radio, managing 7 different regional studios. I would basically build up a system on the bench and then drive it there, install it, turn around and drive back home. That got me the opportunity to verify everything worked exactly as I wanted to before I got it on site. And then it minimized the amount of time that I was there, so that it was basically just a strike force and boom, we're done. So as much organization as you can have going into it. And then, yes, that's going to obviously lend to the documentation after the fact. You're doing it all up front, and then you're able to go in, complete the project, and then basically you've got everything you need once you're wrapped up.
Right. Now, Ira brings up a couple of things. The disadvantage to having to key into both systems while they're running in parallel, and that's not quite accurate, Ira. What you do, you dump selected database, if you will, or selected information from the old system into the new one as a test run, and for users to play with as they learn the system, but that's not the actual info. The day-to-day organization continues to use the old system until switchover date, and at switchover time, everybody stops. You copy that system onto the new system, blowing out all the experimental stuff, and then the new system becomes the system. So there's not really any parallel operation except and again, we call it a sandbox because it's to play in while you're learning how to use it.
Well, let's use the analogy that everybody's done here. Show of hands, audience included. How many of you have done an automation change? How many of you have done that in a week?
Or a
None.
weekend?
Yeah, none. It took months of planning and months of preparation, working with both vendors, the outgoing and the incoming, and your staff to understand what is happening. Because the last thing you want is that Saturday morning host coming in and going, "What the heck is this?"
Yeah.
Now, those are the parallels. And this applies equally to a firewall transition or a Windows update. It requires that level of planning.
Right. And Ira mentions that you need live data to kick the tires and find any bugs. And yes, but again, it's live in the sense that you're entering it. But the advantage of bringing the staff in during the overlap, even though it does require some extra time on their part, it really increases the comfort factor because they get to see and play the new system, knowing that if I screw it up now, it's not going to impact the product. And so, it does tend to invest people a little more. Me anyway, I know I get excited about this sort of stuff. And as we've discovered over the past several weeks, I'm usually the one that growls the most about any changes to what I'm comfortable with. So yeah, to make me part of it, that's a whole different process. All right. That is the end of our hour and a half. I think we've done an hour and a half on just about every session this month. On that note, this webinar, as with all Nautel webinars, will be archived for posterity. You can get to it through the resources tab of our website. We got a Waves newsletter. I think there's one coming up, pre-NAB edition sometime next month. Aaron's making pointy fingers or something. I have no idea what that was, but I probably did something foolish. Did I get spinach on my teeth?
No. The information in the slide below. I'm assuming everyone sees it below me.
See, on mine, it's above.
Oh.
But, it's how you set it up. Anyway, YouTube channel, support guys, put some interesting videos there, all kinds of online info, BarryMichigansBDR.net, Facebook page for any topic ever created or known demand, some of which will even give you. Facebook is a great resource for asking questions. Just understand that you will have, for every good answer with useful information, there will be 9 answers telling you why you did it wrong. Once you get past that and don't take it personally, like Phillips screws on a filter retainer, thanks, Aaron, then life is good and you will get some useful information. On that note, gentlemen, I want to really thank each of you for spending, I mean, this is the 4th session this month that you've all given up a couple hours of your time to share knowledge, and I really want to thank you for that. Aaron, you survived. I told you it wouldn't be that hard. See, you don't have to be smart. You just have to be smarter than me. That's not a big challenge. Anyway, so I do want to thank the three of you for spending so much time this month with us. I really do appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Happy to be here.
Hopefully everybody got something out of it. That's
And
the goal.
on that note, folks, we are going to take a couple of weeks off. Next 2 months are going to be a little slim. Last half of March, we got a webinar. I think I'm planning the 15th, 22nd, maybe the 29th. April will be, I think, no TTTs in April. We're going to hopefully be in Vegas for the first NAB in a long time. Yay. Maybe yay. Anyway, so yep, no session next Tuesday or the one after. However, we hope to see you again on the 15th. Keep an eye out on our Facebook page, other social media, and we'll let you know what they are and when the registration's open as soon as I've figured that stuff out. On that note, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye now.